All right, on to part 2 of our tour that shows you where to find the unique scenery created by the junction of 3 large ecosystems, or physiographic regions, which local people here refer to as the Triple Junction. You should have already watched part 1, starting in Snow Canyon and ending at Lavercan Overlook. Now that we've crossed into the Colorado Plateau, we'll pick up where we left off and head east. Our next place of interest is a climb up to Smith Mesa. This will include an intermediary climb up Hurricane Mesa. Both climbs will include spectacular views of the horizontal layering of the Colorado Plateau and Zion National Park. From the Lavercan Overlook, go back to Highway 9 and turn right. In 2.5 miles, turn left onto Smith Mesa Road, also referred to as just Mesa Road. This small paved road will begin climbing up the side of Hurricane Mesa. Hurricane Mesa is made up mostly of the Moenkopi Formation. Where the road begins to climb, you will be at the place where the Moenkopi began to deposit about 250 million years ago at the start of the Triassic period. Incidentally, just below this point, and about 250 million years ago, marks what is called the End Permian or Permian-Triassic extinction event. I'm sure you've heard about how the dinosaurs all went extinct about 65 million years ago. Well, this is a similar time when organisms living about 250 million years ago died off suddenly for some unknown reason. It's also interesting to note here that near this point is where we transition from the Kaibab limestone to the Moenkopi. As you can see, the terrain changes here considerably. Fossils of organisms found below this point are found nowhere above this point. The Moenkopi was deposited during a time when this area was a very large tidal flat. The area was very similar to a delta, such as the Mississippi River Delta in Louisiana. Sediments from all over deposited over a large, wide area. With the Moenkopi, these deposits changed in composition over and over again for a long period of time due to different types of sediments being washed down from different places and many incursions of ocean water due to tidal flows. All the thin sedimentary layers you'll see in the Moenkopi are made of alternating layers of sandstone, mudstone, and shale. You'll also see thin layers of gypsum, which are these shiny white layers, which kind of break the rule of the horizontal layering seen all around here. Near the top will be where deposition of the Moenkopi ended at about 235 million years ago. These ages are very rough estimates. So the entire Moenkopi Formation was deposited over an approximate 15 million year period. Its thickness is roughly 1,500 feet. That's just over 1/4 mile of vertical deposition. While ascending Hurricane Mesa through the Moenkopi, look for this big turnout about 2.5 miles from the turnoff from Highway 9. Pull over here and enjoy the views to the east. This long ridge of Moenkopi that stretches into the distance, with Zion's towering cliffs in the background, plus the other mesas to the southeast, makes for a very dramatic view of the area. Also, during your trip up from the road, take a close look at all the small layers you'll pass through. You'll see the thin and alternating layers mentioned earlier. In the Triple Junction video, remember the reference to a layer cake when all the formations in the Grand Canyon were being discussed? Here in the Moenkopi, you can see this same layer cake effect, but on a thinner scale and many more layers. Maybe not as grand as the Grand Canyon, but the process is very much the same. Alternating periods of climate and environmental change that occurred on Earth during this period of time. The layers are just like tree rings, each ring recording what was going on at that time. Just before reaching the top, we'll pass through a very different looking rock layer. This is the Shunum conglomerate. Try saying that 5 times real fast. You've heard me refer to this layer in part 1 of the tour. This is a member of the next formation going up, which is called the Chinle formation. But the Shunum conglomerate is really special. It's considered a cap rock and is responsible for forming a lot of the scenery here. This erosion-resistant layer has created many of the mesas around here, including Hurricane Mesa, and has preserved vast stretches of Moenkopi Formation from eroding away. The Shunum conglomerate formed when the environment here transitioned from tidal flats into a braided river system channel, such as what you see here on Copper River in Alaska. This is evident when you look closely at the rock in this layer. You'll see rounded pebbles just like those found in an old riverbed. However, these are all cemented together, basically a conglomerate of pebbles. Thanks to the Shunum conglomerate, Hurricane Mesa is very flat. So are all the other mesas that are topped by this layer. Further on up this road, we'll climb up to another cap rock, which is the top of Smith Mesa. While enjoying the view at that big turnout, you can see 2 distinct cap rock layers, the lower one being the Shunum, and the second one up here, the top of Smith Mesa, which is Springdale sandstone. Because Hurricane Mesa is so flat, the Air Force built a straight 2-mile-long track here to fire rocket sleds that test ejection seats used on supersonic aircraft. Originally, they would shoot the seats over the end of the mesa. Today, however, they shoot off the ejection seat before going over the edge. They still perform tests today. Here you see the cockpit of an F-16 Falcon being prepped onto a sled. The location of the test site on top of Hurricane Mesa is the reason why there is a nice paved road up the side of the mesa. But our paved road leads into the gated test center and entry is not allowed. Our tour continues on this dirt road, which is the continuation of Smith Mesa Road. Incidentally, when we climbed Hurricane Mesa, it looks real massive, didn't it? Well, Smith Mesa, which is visible to the north from here, is roughly 8 times bigger than Hurricane Mesa. You can really only appreciate the size of Smith Mesa from an airplane. When the road begins to climb up from the mesa top, or rather the Shunum conglomerate, we start passing through a thicker member of the Chinle formation. This one is called the petrified wood member. It's called that for obvious reasons, as this layer is full of petrified wood. Like the Moenkopi, the Chinle formation, mainly the petrified wood member, is very widespread and found throughout southern Utah and northern Arizona. After the Moenkopi was deposited, the environment here changed around 215 million years ago from the previous estuaries and river deltas to a swampy area full of big trees similar to today's Louisiana and Florida, which, incidentally, also covers a very large area. Have you ever heard of Petrified Forest National Park? This is all in the Chinle Formation. How about the Painted Desert northeast of Flagstaff, Arizona? These places all consist of Chinle Formation. These colorful landscapes are all famous because of the Chinle. In fact, if you look closely, you'll see traces of these same colors along this portion of our route up Smith Mesa. You might be thinking that petrified wood can be found here. You're right, it can. But it's difficult to find. Just off Smith Mesa Road is this quarry. It was used a few decades ago to mine petrified wood for landscaping. Unfortunately, there's nothing left to look at other than the colorful hills. The Chinle is a soft material and erodes very easily. In many places, from here to northern Arizona, much of the Chinle is gone, eroded away. Its remains were carried down the Colorado River and its tributaries. In other places, such as here, the Chinle has been saved by the cap rocks above it. More on that in a moment. As we climb up through the Chinle, the next formation we cross through is the Moenavi Formation. Its thickness here is about 75 to 100 feet. As we continue climbing, we won't notice much change to soil, rock, or color. However, with the next layer, we will. This is the bottom part of the Cayenta Formation, and this portion is known officially as the Springdale Sandstone member of the Cayenta Formation. Don't worry, there won't be a test at the end. Do you remember back in Silver Reef where silver was found in sandstone? This is that same layer of sandstone. Like the Shunum conglomerate, this sandstone also is a cap rock. This one preserved the Chinle from eroding as discussed earlier. It can also be traced and seen in many places around the southwest, such as nearby Zion, Vermilion Cliffs, and even just outside of Las Vegas. About 3 miles from where the road went from pavement to dirt, Smith Mesa Road will punch through the Springdale Sandstone and pop out on top of Smith Mesa. From this point on, the next 15 miles will be on top of the Springdale Sandstone and will offer expansive vistas of the Zion area and its famous geologic formations. However, just before reaching the top of Smith Mesa, look for this turnoff and small road that heads back south. This is a very rough four-wheel drive road that leads to what's known as Nature's Hot Tub. It's called that because of all the natural potholes that have formed in the Springdale Sandstone, and some have collected water. If you don't want to struggle with a four-wheel drive road or scratch up your rig, park safely here in or near the turnoff and hike up the road. Use your phone to find the hot tub, as we did the first time we found it. Use an app like Gaia GPS with our GPX file loaded, pinpointing the location. If you don't feel like hiking, I'll point out another viewpoint that you can easily access just up ahead on the road. The edge of the mesa near the hot tub offers great views to the east, where you can pick out the various formations discussed in the Triple Junction video, from the Moenkopi to the top of the Navajo Sandstone, which is where this picture showing the various formations was taken. You can also choose to go on a 4-mile round-trip hike here that takes you out onto the southern tip of Smith Mesa, which is like a peninsula that juts out over the surrounding area and offers spectacular 270-degree views. Taking in this hike will also give you an expanded experience of the unique characteristics of the Springdale Sandstone that includes more potholes and these yellow streaks blended into the pale reddish colored sandstone. This is one of our favorite hikes. Another highlight of this hike is a view of the Hurricane Mesa test track we passed earlier. You can see the entire length of its track. Plus, you'll see places that we've already visited on this tour west of the Hurricane Fault. Naturally, this hike will take half a day, if not more. If you plan on taking this hike, you will only have time to take the second half of the Triple Junction tour as described in this video. Just past the turnoff to Nature's Hot Tub, you'll reach the top of Smith Mesa. Immediately on the right, there are a few short roads that lead to the edge of the mesa. All these roads offer great views to the east and are an alternative to taking the four-wheel drive road discussed earlier. From these viewpoints, you'll see the famous formations that make up the Zion area. You'll also see this perfectly shaped cinder cone that actually sits inside of the national park's boundary. We'll pass by one of its lava flows at the end of our tour. The road now stays on top of Smith Mesa for the next 15 miles. While on the mesa, you'll be treated to expansive views of the Zion area. Except for being in an airplane, Smith Mesa is the only place in the region where you can see all of Zion National Park in one sweep of the eyes. Other than the views, there isn't much geology to look at in these 15 miles. simply because we'll be driving on top of the Springdale Sandstone for that distance. All the land on Smith Mesa is privately owned and primarily used for cattle grazing. Please be respectful and stay on or near the main road, and don't stray off into any fenced-off areas. There's still a lot of geology to look at from Smith Mesa. When you look to the west, you'll see our old friend, the Pine Valley Laccolith. In the foreground, we'll also see the other side of Black Ridge. This is the front or west side we saw earlier. This is the back or east side. You can see how this ridge uplifted and tilted to the east. When we look north and east, we'll mainly see the vast Navajo Sandstone, along with some Kayenta Formation. From the level we're currently at on Smith Mesa, the somewhat steep slopes that form upwards and have narrow bands with vegetation is all Kayenta Formation. Above the Kayenta, the even steeper slopes and vertical cliffs are all Navajo Sandstone. Notice too that it doesn't have the bands like the Kayenta, but instead colored bands caused by different levels of oxidation. About 5 miles from where we popped out on top of Smith Mesa, we'll reach the high point of the mesa. The road will climb a small hill like this. Then a panoramic view like this will be seen in all directions. Look closely here at all the layers, mainly the Kayenta and Navajo Sandstone. You can see how they would project flatly east into the Colorado Plateau. They do so for hundreds of miles, as far away as Moab and Lake Powell. A few miles after this high point, the road will make a 90-degree right turn. Here you can stop and look over the edge of the mesa and look down into the canyon created by Lavercan Creek. Across the canyon is what's known as Kolob Fingers, or in reverse, Kolob Canyons. This is the most northern unit of Zion National Park. The Kolob Fingers are actually a series of 7 fins that project out to the west, almost touching I-15. Between these fins, or fingers, are individual canyons that make up Kolob Canyons, the section's namesake. What you're looking at here, and have been seeing in the distance since you reached the top of Smith Mesa, is the edge of the southernmost finger. Now that you're closer, you can appreciate the sheer vertical cliffs that the Navajo Sandstone can create. By the way, this finger is called Timber Top Mountain. Its elevation is right at 8,000 feet. In this view, you can see the Springdale Sandstone caprock here. Its elevation is 5,200 feet. So this gives you an idea of how thick the Navajo Sandstone is, with about 800 feet of it being Kayenta Formation. After that turn, the road will now traverse the eastern half of Smith Mesa. It will twist around the tops or beginnings of a few canyons that cut into the Springdale Sandstone, Chinle, and Moenkopi formations below it. This ranch, we'll pass on the right, happens to be owned by a large family of world champion rodeo performers, all with a last name of Wright. They have been rodeo stars for almost 20 years. Near the ranch, the imprints of these dinosaur footprints can be found in one of the sandstone bands of the Kayenta Formation. You can see by the size of the print that these dinos were quite big. Finally, after about 15 miles of driving on top of Smith Mesa, we start descending the mesa at the same point we cross the border and enter Zion National Park. As we start our somewhat steep descent, we'll get a close-up view of those narrow bands or layers of strata that are common in both the Kayenta and Moenavi formations. Both are often made up of alternating bands of smooth sandstone and a mixture of fine-grained shales and limestones, such as we see here. Smith Mesa Road ends at the pavement of Kolob Terrace Road. Make a hard left turn here to visit Cave Valley. Kolob Terrace Road climbs rather steeply from here. In just 1.8 miles, it will climb 1,000 feet, which is about a 10% grade. When the road levels out, you'll be in Cave Valley, which is surrounded by abrupt outcroppings of Navajo sandstone. On the right side of the road, you'll see a large meadow with large mounds of Navajo sandstone in the background. Above these mounds are numerous hoodoos, or more correctly named, beehives. In many places around Zion, these beehives are common in large blocks of Navajo sandstone, such as the park's east side. Cave Valley is named after the various caves that have been formed in the block of sandstone here. They've been used for countless centuries by Native Americans. On the left side of the road is Lamb's Knoll. This is a large single outcropping of Navajo sandstone. This area is popular with rock climbers. A short walk through this area will lead you to some narrow passageways and places that are fun to explore. Kolob Terrace Road continues to climb through the Navajo sandstone for several more miles until it reaches the next formation. However, at this point, the geology is difficult to see because of all the trees. From Cave Valley, our tour will now go back down towards Highway 9, where we began our climb. On the descent, we'll look at all the formations we saw on the way up, but in the opposite order now. After passing by where we turned off Smith Mesa Road, the road passes Springdale Sandstone and Chinle formations. Above us, we can see various mountains made of Kayenta and Navajo sandstone. After exiting Zion National Park, the road meanders down on top of a narrow finger made of basalt, most likely from the cinder cone we saw earlier on top of Smith Mesa, or a couple of cinder cones just above Cave Valley. Regardless of where the lava came from, this narrow finger that the road was built on top of has deep canyons on each side. After seeing all the geology on this tour that was created over hundreds of millions of years ago, it is hard to believe that this little finger and its canyons were created rather recently in geologic time. The level that the road is now on is the top of the once large lava flow from cinder cones that erupted between 200 and 800,000 years ago. After the lava dried and turned to basalt, it took less than 200,000 years for the creeks on both sides to dig these canyons and erode away the basalt. Providing it's safe to do so with traffic, stop at one of the pullouts on the left side of the road. Look over both edges of the road to see how deep the erosion has dug down. You can also get a close-up view of the bubbly basalt rock. At this point in the descent, you'll notice we're now passing through the Moan Kopie. When we reach the end of our descent, we'll once again be at the bottom of the Moan Kopie, close to the transition with the Kaibab limestone. Now, on to our last two stops that look back at some of the places we previously visited. Once you reach Highway 9, navigate to 1300 North Main Street in Hurricane. This is the trailhead to the southern portion of Confluence Park. This viewpoint offers yet another great sweeping view of all three regions. You may remember it from the Triple Junction video. At the viewpoint, you'll find this sign that points out some of the places we visited. The last stop is also in Hurricane. From Main Street, navigate to Cliffhanger Drive, then drive to its very western end. This stop provides a great view of Babylon and the uplifted ridges created by the Virgin Anticline. Looking north and into the canyon created by the Virgin River, you'll see this scene. Here's the ruins of the silver mill we drove to, and you can see Black Ridge in the distance. And that wraps up our tour. So now you not only know what the Triple Junction is and the geologic story behind it, you also have been on a virtual tour to see this amazing geologic story. That story is the reason Southwest Utah has the spectacular and unique scenery that it does. We've given you a lot of information in this two-part video, so if you'd like to see these places yourself, but not have to worry about remembering all the details, relax and hire a tour guide. They will do the driving and explaining and have four-wheel drive vehicles to handle the possibly rough roads on this tour. Remember that backroadswest.com partners with 2 tour guide companies to coordinate private tours of what you saw in this video. They are Greater Zion Tours and Southwest Adventure Tours. To learn more, see our website at backroadswest.com. Select Creative Travel Guides here. Then select the Tours option up here. This webpage will provide the latest information on tour offerings. Also, be sure to check out our blog post covering this tour that will include any updates and additions to the tour, as well as an interactive map showing the stops. And if you want to drive this tour yourself, there is also a GPX file that you can download to your phone that will guide you to the places of interest in the tour. We hope you enjoyed this virtual tour of the spectacular geologic scenery influenced by the junction of these 3 famous physiographic regions here in the Southwest. When you saddle up to take this tour in person, we bid you happy exploring.